Hi, this is a video abstract for our paper in Developmental Science entitled Large-Scale Data Decipher Children's Scale Errors, a meta-analytic approach using the zero-inflated Poisson models.
So what is scale error? Scale error is when young children tries to fit their bodies into very small object. In this video example, an 18-month-old boy repeatedly tries to fit his body into a miniature car. However, it's important to note that not all children exhibit scale errors. When observing the value of 0 in the task of scale error, it's difficult to determine whether the child doesn't produce scale error at all, or whether the child who produces scale errors doesn't execute them at the time of observation.
Given that scale errors are less frequent events, we used zero-inflated Poisson model, the ZIP model, to adequately capture the structure of data. The ZIP model can directly cope with the count data with a stack of zeros and distinguish two sources of zeros. One source comes from whether the child produces scale errors or not. Zero observations from this part mean that the child does not produce scale errors at all. The other source relates to how many scale errors the child produces. Zero observations from this count part mean that the child produces scale errors, but she doesn't execute scale errors at the time of observation. Thanks to other scale error researchers, we have succeeded in aggregating existing datasets across 9 studies from Japan, the UK, and the US with different task settings between the laboratories and classrooms. We finally got 766 data points from more than 500 totalers. We fit the ZIP model to the data while regarding aging month or other developmental indices as continuous variables and using nonlinear functions to detect the peak of scale errors. The results suggested that the developmental trend of scale errors was well documented by an inverted U-shaped curve rather than a simple linear function. However, nonlinearity belonged to different aspects of the scale errors between the laboratory and classroom data. For the in-lab data, age-related nonlinearity appeared in the yes-no part of scale errors, peaking at 18 months. On the other hand, for the classroom data, age-related nonlinearity showed up in the count part of scale errors, and its peak was 26 months. The probability of scale errors was much higher in the classroom settings than in laboratory settings. We assume that this is because classroom settings had a longer observation duration and were more familiar to the children. Given that the peak of the classroom data was much later than in lab data, we speculate that the underlying mechanisms of scale errors may be different between these two settings. Using the sub-dataset that contained children's vocabulary measure, we also fit the ZIP model to the data while regarding vocabulary size as a developmental index instead of aging month. We found that the peak appeared at a total vocabulary size of approximately 140 words, and predicate vocabulary size, such as adjectives or verbs, better predicted developmental changes in scale errors rather than non-vocabulary size. We believe that our achievements set a fruitful stage for future research that directly investigates the relationships between scale errors and other cognitive, language, or contextual factors, leading to a unified account of the mechanisms underlying scale errors. For more details, please have a look at our paper in Developmental Science.